Welcome and Happy New Year to everybody at GitLab. Looking to be the best year yet. FY21 is just around the corner. We're super excited about that. My name is Christopher Leffoltz. I'm the Senior Director of Development. This is the development group conversation where we talk about all things related to software development and things going on in this part of the organization. The group conversation slides and conversational chat should be in the link associated with the invite. And we'll go ahead and allow folks to kick off with questions. And Sid, you have the first question, so we'll go ahead and let you verbalize that.
Yeah, thanks. I love the focus on review to merge and that it's doubled or tripled since mid-2018. I think that's a big reason for kind of the not getting to our goal of 12 or 14 MRs per development engineer. There are some possibilities mentioned. I'm not sure you want to elaborate beyond that. And then the other question is, should measuring this be a GitLab feature?
Yeah, all good questions. We'll try to go through them in sequence here. So thanks for the kind words about the review focus. The possibilities I listed there, or at least our initial thoughts on it, we kind of discovered this, or we kind of, the real kicker for me was basically breaking this cycle time into two different distinct parts. Obviously, the time that actually gets to review, because ironically enough, earlier in the year, we had a number of engineering managers said, well, we're asking engineers to open their review MRs earlier, so that's why time's been going up, and that may be true, but like the data obviously doesn't back that when we actually start showing that. So that is definitely one of the pieces there. The three things I listed there was, maintainer ratios, which I think we definitely need to bring down and kind of see how that adjusts things, though I don't think that that's kind of root cause there associated with it. I think more likelihood is more iterations in the review, but I don't have any data to obviously back that up. And then, obviously, that could be for a variety of reasons, being cautious or not cautious. Beyond those reasons, I think there are other options that are out there. One is because of our async nature. It could be that we're just allowing our reviews to kind of hang out for a couple of days. You could argue that that's dead time, but it could be, ironically enough, dead time that breaks the flow for engineers to actually get work done. It could also be populations where we're seeing, for instance, a case where, like the person who's reviewing is on the other side of the world, so you already lose a day there associated with it, where maybe the teams were more geographically inclined at a point. So then the question becomes does that async nature actually show some effectiveness or ineffectiveness associated with it? But obviously, before I would want to make any kind of assertions of that nature, I'd want to have some data to kind of back it up around that. Those are kind of the high level ideas. Do you have other suggestions of things we should look at as possibilities?
No, I don't. I think the suggestions are so good that I don't wanna. I don't have any other suggestions. I think they're all good. I think iteration is still our hardest value. So that's my go-to thing. Every time something is slow, I like make it smaller, make it smaller. I think that's still the hardest value to practice, but that's already mentioned.
Yeah, and this is kind of interesting in regards to MR to get to review time has kind of been flat, which, one thing you could say is people are prepping their work. We definitely have the concept of proof of concepts where folks are working on things that don't necessarily hit the light of day. I think that's going to be another thing that I want to look at as we go into FY21 is how much we're doing that and how much of that work could we potentially be pushing into the product sooner, even if it's POC as an example from that perspective. So I think those are things that we got to kind of look at, but it's definitely a piece of that. Your last question there was, should we be measuring this as a GitLab feature? And the short answer is definitely we do. One of the things we had to figure out was how we were actually going to measure this and what we were going to use as our marker, because there's some details in there depending on how you do it. And I believe the way we've defined it is essentially when it goes from author to, when the assignee goes from author to anybody else, that's essentially considered going to review stage. So that's going to be the tricky part about this, but that's where I think we definitely want to get this in the product. And if anything, we want to start thinking about potentially measuring that second part of the cycle, and maybe even thinking about having a list or alarming type of notification, not obviously in a true operational sense of, waking people up in the middle of the night, but thinking in terms of, okay, like, do we have outliers that we need to help people on related to reviews, or have coaching discussions around from that perspective, just to understand the situation.
Yeah, well, if we have a graph and then like what are the things that are taking the longest, that would already be super helpful. Yeah, either in code analytics, what Dan mentions in the agenda, or even in cycle time analytics. But I think it would be great to have this as a GitLab feature instead of us making custom dashboards that our customers can't use.
And agree, definitely want to head that direction. And Dan Jensen put in a comment there around the fact of using code review analytics MVC as kind of foundation for this. So I think is again, getting the definition kind of solidified and kind of looking at some initial data to convince ourselves we were getting it right. And this is definitely encouraging data from that perspective. Cool. Sid also has the next question.
Yeah, I think Goff put that on there because it was a remark I made, but it is not necessarily a question. I just since I have the word, but I love how we're focusing on velocity and cycle time and getting things out there. I think it's so essential when you slowed. We have so many new people joining. And as soon as you slow down, it's super hard to speed up again. All the people coming on board will think this is the normal speed. So getting back up to speed sooner rather than later is so important.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'll just do an additional public service announcement on is we added back in early November, and you merged this, Sid, was basically the concept of cleaning up self-directed cleanup, where it's very short iterations associated with it, and providing incremental value with it. There are, I think, 7,000 to-dos currently in the code base where we actually have it marked off as something that we said, hey, here's something we need to come back to and address at some point. Obviously, some of those are not going to be trivial, so those would be deeper discussions that we want to make sure we get prioritized with product. But if you see things that could be cleaned up very quickly or addressed very appropriately, we should be thinking in those terms. I encourage every engineer to be thinking in terms and using that capability. I think we use the label "things should just work" as kind of a label there. So if you have an opportunity to something that is you see like that, just please mark it with that, because that's one of the things we'll also be tracking here coming into FY21 is how many times we're doing that. So I encourage everybody to think in those terms. Cool. Thanks for the question, Sid. I don't see other questions, but I want to open it up to see if folks have questions. A couple of highlights I will call out. One is yesterday, if anybody didn't notice, we turned on merge trains for a day to do some additional analysis on the handbook. Thank you, Darby and Shinya and the rest of the CI/CD team on basically working on implementing that and making it even better by dogfooding it. Really happy to hear that our performance is much improved. Darby, do you want to off the cuff kind of articulate that for us?
Sure. So I think there's a link in the slides there to kind of the results from yesterday's test. What we're tracking is kind of like the merge time to merge on those MRs that go through the merge train, and then we also are looking at like what position they are on the train, since that can things that are later in the train can be affected by failures early in the train. So that's linked in the slide. You can take a look at that. For the most part, everything was within the range we were hoping for. There was a few that spiked up. There is a case where when you can still forcibly merge and bypass the merge train if you want to. So if you need to get something in right away, if it's urgent, you can still do that. What does happen in that case, though, is that the train has to restart for everyone that's in that train, because we've now changed what master is. So something to keep in mind if you're going to use that sledgehammer. Just use it cautiously. But those were kind of the only times that we saw that build time spike up, just because the build had to restart. So, and then I think there's a link in the slides also to the Slack channel. It's, what is it again? F_merge trains. If you have questions, comments, concerns, or anything comes up, please post there, and we'll jump on that stuff right away.
Cool. And did we disable it back? Because we said we were going to do it for a 24-hour period, and then we were going to turn it back off.
So I think it's actually still on today.
Okay.
And so we're going to keep collecting data. Since we didn't see any big issues, we're going to go with it for a little while longer. And then I've got to sync up later this week to talk with a few other folks about those build times and see if we want to keep it on or if we want to go back to the way it was.
Yeah. Just to clarify, if we do keep it on, let's make sure we have an alarming that if it goes above a certain threshold that we're going to take action, because last time around we did see merge times up to 3 hours, and that's something we want to avoid to keep the company running.
Yep. Yeah, I think we've solved most of those issues with the fixes that we introduced, but we're keeping a close eye on things, and yeah, we'll definitely add some better monitoring there.
Hi, Darby. Do you know if there's a way to track down who used the sledgehammer and to kind of interview them to find out what the rationale was, and maybe if that requires a feature adjustment?
Yeah, so we are tracking that. It's in the metric stock that's linked. So we haven't actually talked with any folks directly about that, but it is something that we can capture in our data, and we are sort of collecting that with the daily reports that we're building.
I propose we call it a derailment, since it's a merge train.
I like it. We could change the button to say derail the merge train, and merge might change.
I think that'd be fun. By the way, this is a super awesome feature, and all the features, it wasn't ready for prime time until we started dogfooding it, and I hope that everyone sees that you haven't really shipped anything until we're using it ourselves, and it's going to be a focus of, for example, for the metrics team and things like that. Nothing in GitLab ever became successful without us using it. So that's always getting it out in the release post is one thing, but it's real when we start using it. So super excited, by the way, to see this. I can't emphasize enough how useful merge trains are. If you're a big company and you have an iOS app that everyone needs to update, this is such a useful feature.
Yeah, and if you have real use cases around the direct to merge, please bring it back to us, because that's the case that we're mostly concerned about. But we're super excited to see this on. This is really cool. The first time around, it obviously was rough, but this has actually led us to some really deep understanding of kind of how to think about these and think intuitively about it from that perspective. So we're really appreciative of that.
Hey Darby, are we gonna turn this on for the main GitLab repository?
We've been talking with engineering productivity about that. There's a few concerns about if that will have a sort of a negative effect given flaky builds and other issues that we're seeing right now. One thing that I think can happen with this feature is if our builds aren't super stable, then the failures can actually lead to cascading. So the way I've described it is it's a very defensive feature in terms of keeping master green. And so it kind of keeps master green at all costs. That can have other downstream effects. And so we want to make sure we balance that with our ability to be productive.
Yes. So it's kind of like if you force something to the top of the queue, you derail everything before that. But if one of the builds fails, everything after that is also derailed because that is taken out of the merge queue. So flaky tests are a bigger
that's exactly it. So you could have a bunch of things that have to get restarted, and then that pushes the build back another however long the build takes. So.
Yeah, and we're not having if the feature branch passes, does master fail? Like we're not experiencing that a lot, apparently.
So I think there are cases now where the test is maybe like, unreliable, and so it passes in the feature branch, and then when it goes to master, that same test that passed failed and there were no changes, or some scenarios like that. I don't have a lot of the data on that to know for sure all of the cases where that happens.
Yeah, I think it's not about the flaky test, but it's like, is the feature branch, the test passes, but the merge with master somehow changes the code to an extent that that the code is no longer correct, and hence the test fail. That's the thing we will prevent with this. I'm not sure how frequently that is occurring, if at all.
It is occurring, actually. That's part of and I don't have the percentages in front of us, but I have definitely seen anecdotal data around the fact of, okay, 2 merges, basically a unit test fails because of basically not a merge conflict, but a basic spec change that basically affected that. And that seems to be a little bit of artifact of the way specs are defined within Ruby, if I remember correctly, that anecdotal data. So it is happening. So merge trains on there would be appropriate. The thing is like Darby said, one, we got to get master to be more consistent. The other thing is we actually got to be really diligent about test time. We're doing about 100 MRs a day, business day this is, and that's like how I look at things. Is I look at a month and say, how many business days do I have? And that's the productivity here that I should have based on the team size that we have. 100 MRs doesn't leave, I forget what the math consists of, and I've done it a few times, but I think it's less than 5 minutes of test time. Otherwise, you're going to basically start backing things up. So that's where we have to think in terms of you're serializing the process. So if you do that, you have to cut down basically the time associated. Otherwise, your queue becomes super long associated with it. And OpenStack's probably the good example where they did the serialization, and it led to a lot of headaches, even at a much smaller basically MR rate for their product. At least that's been my historical experience in that area.
It's not so much that the tests have to go faster, but they have to be more reliable, because the not being able to make tests in 5 minutes, that's all reason to get merge trains. But they do have to be reliable, otherwise you get these halfway derailments the whole time.
You definitely need that, but you also need to think in terms of if you divide 24 times 7 times 60 by 100, the number you get back is actually, or 24 times 60 by 100, you actually get time to get back. Otherwise, what happens is the train gets really long. So literally your train is 50 or 60 deep for a day because everybody committed at the same time. And that's, if you have a workforce that's tolerant of a commit today and it merges tomorrow, that's fine. Maybe we're okay. But definitely we don't have that workforce with the handbook. People want to see their merges happen and be up on the website very quickly. Software code base, you could argue, it could be a little bit longer than our tolerance on the handbook.
I think if everything is stable, the merge trains shouldn't lead to any increase. Like it should lead to the increase. Like first you do the feature branch and then you do the merge with master. But as soon as that merge with master completes, hopefully if it's consistent, it shouldn't be any slower.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is right now they're all running in parallel, so that serialization is lost. It's not slower, though you could argue that that's causing master to go red, so that's problematic. But it is basically parallel processing versus serialization.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, man.
No, go ahead.
So if I may jump in, we had these discussions on enabling merge trains on the main repo, and I believe we have an issue for it. The current plan and priority is for us to stabilize. Master has been improving, and we'll cover that in the engineering key matrix review. And the plan for us was, let's try it on the handbook first and flush out the bugs. Once we have improvements, we'll accelerate enabling merge trains for the main repo. And the engineering project team is aware and is on it. From this comment here, I believe we can be more aggressive. I would suggest to the team and bringing that back of maybe we can set an ambitious goal of start enabling this in Q2 and enable it for a short time and see where things break. I believe we have progress on the flaky test and master branch. So things look promising there.
Cool. When you say Q2, you mean, do you mean Q1 or Q2?
Probably the end of Q1. So next quarter, I think Q1 we're still going to focus on flaky and stability and paying down the momentum on that. I think Q2 is probably a suitable goal to try to enable this.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you.
Cool. Kai has no voice, which is a great time for me to ask him to talk or argue with him. So I got to remember that for the rest of the week. His question, I'll verbalize it, is has iteration for EMs, PMs scheduled Friday? Is there a calendar invite for that? Yes, there is a calendar invite. It's going to be live streamed as well. I debated about whether, since it's an interview, I really wanted to try to keep it to Sid and his shadows. Though Sid, if you have open feedback on that, we could make it more of a group discussion. It is going to be a live stream. I'm still working on putting together the questions kind of line up associated with that. It's at 11 Central or 9 a.m. 11 Central or 9 a.m. Pacific time for those who are interested. And if you want, I can forward you the invite if you want to keep that blocked off. And say if you have feedback of whether
I don't have an opinion, up to you.
Okay. Cool. This is really enjoyable, by the way. I like the lively discussion, even if we covered one topic deeply. Really appreciate all the feedback on the various topics. I'm going to use a Daniel Croft statement. I'm going to pause awkwardly to see if there are any follow-on questions.
I don't think in the history of GitLab, that has never happened. So the new instructions say, just don't do it. Out of questions, out of time. It's good. It's good, Christopher. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Sid. Appreciate it, everybody. Everybody have a great day and a happy new year.